Hey there, welcome to the channel. My name is James, and here at 20th and 21st Movies, we are about all things cinema. All right, I wanted to take a few minutes to share with you my thoughts on a recent release from Warner Brothers on 4K Ultra HD. This is part of their WB100 series of 4K releases, and it is a classic film from the early 1940s. It's from 1941, and I think this might be the directorial debut of John Huston. And of course, it's one of the early leading roles for Humphrey Bogart, and it is the 1941 film, The Maltese Falcon. This is a classic film in all of cinema. It is an early noir film from 1941. It's a detective story. It stars Humphrey Bogart in this legendary role as Detective Sam Spade. He stars alongside Mary Astor, who plays just a wonderful role. She's a mysterious lady in this film, a bit duplicitous, and she has some things up her sleeve that Sam Spade has to navigate around. But this is a masterful story and just a beautiful film. The source material is a novel. I think it's a novel or a story written by Dashiell Hammett, who wrote this story in San Francisco in 1928. Warner Brothers bought the film rights to the story in 1930, and they went on to make 3 versions of this story, The Maltese Falcon, 5 years apart for each of these versions. So the first version was in 1931. It was called The Maltese Falcon, and it wasn't very successful because it sort of departed from the source material in that it was a little bit risque and a little bit too explicit. So it didn't work. In 1936, they came back. They actually renamed it Satan Met a Lady, and it starred Bette Davis. And this came out in 1936, and in this case, they made it a little bit too comedic, so that one didn't work. And then 5 years later, they finally struck gold with this 1941 version that was directed by John Huston in what is probably his very first directed film. Of course, he would serve alongside other directors like Howard Hawks. He worked for him for a while. Finally got his break to direct his first film, which might be this one right here, Maltese Falcon. You also have Humphrey Bogart, who gets the starring role in this film. Humphrey Bogart, prior to this film, had been playing more of a supporting character, a bad guy in support of other leading actors' films. So there were other bigger stars that he was supporting along the way. Finally got his shot as a leading man in this film, The Maltese Falcon. The same year, he also starred in a film that was written by John Huston. The screenplay was written by John Huston, but directed by Raoul Walsh, and that's High Sierra. You'll note that High Sierra, this is the Criterion Collection edition of this film, the Spine 1029 in the collection, and this film came out in 1941 as well. You'll notice that he starred alongside Ida Lupino, who got top billing at the time because she was the bigger star. You have Humphrey Bogart down here. So this film came out the same year that The Maltese Falcon came out. And so those were the beginning days of Humphrey Bogart getting his shot as a leading role in Hollywood, or leading man in Hollywood. And then of course the following year, he got the role that would be the role that pretty much everybody, when they think of Humphrey Bogart, they think of Casablanca. His character is Rick Blaine in this story. One of the classic films of all time, one of the greatest films ever made, that came out in 1942. This is the film that really, made him famous forever, so to speak. But it's those 2 films that came out the year before, High Sierra and The Maltese Falcon, that really got Humphrey Bogart started as a leading man. So in this film, The Maltese Falcon, Humphrey Bogart plays Sam Spade. He's a detective in San Francisco. He has a partner. They own a private detective agency. They're approached by this lady here, played by Mary Astor, who plays a mysterious woman in this film. She plays Ruth Wonderly and Bridget O'Shaughnessy. So she is playing a couple of different roles, using different names. She's a bit duplicitous, and she presents them with this bogus story of her sister being missing. Well, that turned out to not be true. One thing leads to another, and very early on in this film, there are a couple of murders. I won't say who gets murdered, but there are a couple of murders early in this film. So Sam Spade is having to deal with the mystery of those murders, and he's also having to deal with the second thing, which is the very title of this film, and that is this mysterious object called the Maltese Falcon that some very evil people are trying to find. The evil people are played by Peter Lorre. The other character, Sidney Greenstreet, plays the lead evil guy trying to get their hands on the Maltese Falcon, which is a black sculpture of a bird or a falcon that is covered in jewels or diamonds or what have you, or encrusted with these jewels that make it very valuable. And so they're trying to get their hands on it and get the money for it. And so you have Humphrey Bogart, Sam Spade in the center of this murder mystery and this chase by these evil no-gooders to get their hands on the Maltese Falcon. And that is really the main thrust of this detective story, this film noir classic, this story about lust and greed, and all of these basic human emotions are at play in this wonderful story that's written with incredibly snappy dialogue, a hard-boiled style, and it's just presented in a fantastically compelling way that, as someone who is watching this film for the first time, I really, really enjoyed. I actually found myself watching the first 20 minutes of this movie. I watched the first 20 minutes of this film like 3 times before I finished the rest of this movie, because I just wanted to understand and get engrossed in this world. And it's just a fascinating tale, just following Sam Spade as he's navigating through this world and trying to figure out what's going on with this woman played by Mary Astor. You know, who are these people who are trying to find the Maltese Falcon? What is, why is this Maltese Falcon object so mysterious and so enigmatic, so to speak? And that's just part of what makes this story absolutely compelling to watch. And so I enjoyed that. I enjoyed, learning about the history of this film and the special features. But the movie itself, The Maltese Falcon, is an absolute delight. And I think for those who are fans of this movie, you're going to be very pleased with this edition, because it is presented on 4K Ultra HD and it looks absolutely phenomenal. I'll just cut to the chase. I mean, the picture quality, it just looks great on this 4K Ultra HD disc. It's a really good example of how black and white films properly restored and put on 4K discs can look absolutely phenomenal. Okay, in terms of a nice restoration, doing a nice job cleaning up the picture. I saw no blemishes, no scratches, no nothing. It looked beautifully cleaned up. There's a nice layer of grain, of course, because this was shot on film, but you get some very nice detail in the image, nice contrast in the image. You can see the detail in the clothing, the faces, nice separation of objects in the foreground and the background, just a sense of three-dimensionality in the image. It just looks beautifully rendered on this 4K disc. It's just a great example of how nice black and white films, classic black and white films, beautifully restored, how nice they can look on the 4K format. And just the fact that you can see the differences in the shades of blacks and grays in the image in ways that if you were to see this film on a standard Blu-ray or a DVD or a VHS, those blacks and grays would get kind of mushed together and you wouldn't see the distinctions in those colors in the same way that you see it beautifully detailed on this 4K disc. So absolutely fantastic detail, contrast, everything. It just looks healthy and beautifully balanced and is a beautiful looking 4K image. Now the sound also comes across very nicely. It's a mono track. It's a DTS HD Master Audio 2.0 mono track, and you have a lot of dialogue on this film, and you can hear hear what everybody is saying, pretty well. It sounds just perfectly fine. But the star of the presentation is, of course, the 4K image of this restoration, and it looks, I would have to say, as best it has ever looked. I mean, I've never owned this film on any other format, Blu-ray or DVD or VHS. This is my first time seeing this movie on any format, and I'm highly impressed. And I have to say, I can't imagine it looking anywhere near as good on any of those earlier formats. This has got to be the best this film has ever looked, and I think they did a great job with the restoration. Now, in terms of the special features, I think this edition shines pretty well. I mean, now you have a lot of archival features on here, but you've got a commentary by Bogart biographer Eric Lax, which is, a pretty good commentary. It can feel a little dry at times, but he goes into a lot of detail in that commentary. So I think that is definitely worth listening to. But there's a couple of features on the Blu-ray disc that you will definitely want to take note of. The first being the Maltese Falcon, One Magnificent Bird. That feature does a really nice job of breaking down the different versions of this film, the one that was done in 1931, 1936, and 1941, and talking about John Huston and the actors in those films. And I think that was really, really, well done. Just telling you about the history of the Maltese Falcon story and the writer Dashiell Hammett and his background. You actually hear from one of his granddaughters telling the story of her grandfather writing the story. So fantastic special feature. The other special feature on here that I want to bring to your attention is Becoming Attractions, the trailers of Humphrey Bogart. And that's where, I think it's TCM or someone, they show, all of these trailers from these films that Humphrey Bogart starred in. And they talk about, Humphrey Bogart's beginnings in Hollywood, how he was more of a supporting actor, playing bad guys in films led by much bigger stars. Of course, the ironic thing is that Humphrey Bogart would go on to be a much bigger star than any of those stars at the end of the day. But it's just a fantastic overview of Humphrey Bogart's career from his early days, working his way up to being a leading man, to becoming a leading man in this film, in High Sierra, to going on to do Casablanca and other films. So just a fantastic overview of Humphrey Bogart's career. You also have some short subjects in here, some, like little film shorts. You have some cartoons, some like Looney Tunes cartoons on here. You have some radio adaptations, some pretty nice features on here, including trailers of Sergeant York from 1941, the 1931 Maltese Falcon, and also the 1936 Satan Met a Lady, which was the second version of this story from Warner Brothers. So I think you get a nice collection of special features on the Blu-ray that's included in this package, and it really helps you learn more about the director John Huston and how he started as working in Hollywood and working his way up to being a director. Humphrey Bogart. You learn a lot about Peter Lorre and Sidney Greenstreet. You learn a lot about them and how they would go on to work with Humphrey Bogart in other films in the future, including Sidney Greenstreet playing a small role in Casablanca. And so, of course, in Maltese Falcon, they played the villains trying to find the Maltese Falcon, but they would go on to work on other projects with Humphrey Bogart. But you learn a lot about them. You learn a lot about Mary Astor. You learn a lot about John Huston, about Humphrey Bogart. So I think the special features do a nice job of just telling you more about the story of the Maltese Falcon and who wrote it, as well as the principal players who played a role in making this film one of the greatest films of all time. So overall, this edition comes highly recommended from WB100. It is definitely a great film. I'm glad that I had a chance to finally watch this movie. I was blown away for the opening shot, how it opened up in San Francisco, the Golden Gate Bridge. And when I saw this, I was thinking to myself, because we had just gotten in from San Francisco, and I'm thinking, less than 24 hours ago, as the time I was first watching this and seeing that opening shot, I was on the Golden Gate Bridge walking across it. And now I'm back home in Atlanta watching this movie opening up with the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco. I didn't even know that the Maltese Falcon was based in San Francisco. So it was one of those strange coincidences. But this is a great film, and this is a very nice addition from WB100. I think this is a great addition, and I highly, highly recommend it. But let me know in the comments section below, what do you think of this film, The Maltese Falcon? What do you think of Humphrey Bogart in this movie? What are some of your favorite films from director John Huston? And what are some of your favorite roles that you've seen Humphrey Bogart play in his film career? Let me know all that in the comment section below. And as always, thanks for watching, and we look forward to seeing you next time at the movies. Peace.